Good morning, folks. I'd like to call the Planning and Stakeholders Relations Committee meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is a roll call. And so I'd like to begin with that. John Tagg.
Stephanie Turman.
Okay. I see that Allie's not on, I guess. Is any other board
Allie's
members
here.
like to identify? Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Any other board members like to identify themselves?
Jeff Letwin.
Jen Liptak.
Michelle Smianik.
Well, good morning, folks. The second item is the approval of the minutes. I hope that everybody's had a chance to review the minutes, and are there any changes to those minutes? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes approved. Philip St. Pierre, you're up.
Sir, thank you. All right. Good morning, committee members. I'm Philip St. Pierre. I'm the Director of Transit Scheduling at PRT. And today I'm going to give a presentation on the upcoming June 18th, 2023 service changes. So we had an update to our collective bargaining agreement for the months that our service changes go into effect. Our last service change was in February. Our next service change will be in June, and our following service change will be in October. So we'll have 3 service changes per year. The categories of the changes today we include running time adjustments for some routes, frequency changes for a few routes. We do have some routing changes and some trip adjustments. So the following routes will have daily running time or travel time adjustments for these routes. This is aiming to improve on time and performance and reliability. So the daily adjustments will be for the Route 20, the 22, 24, the 52L, 60, 64, 67, the 71 series, the A, B, C, and D, the 81, 83, and the P68. The following routes will have weekday only schedule adjustments, 28X, 53L, 71, P7, P12, P67, and the P71. The following routes will have weekend only adjustments on the Route 4 and the Route 53. We do have some frequency changes due to these running time adjustments. The Route 20, every day of the week will go from every 60 minutes to every 55 minutes of frequency all day. The Route 22 on Sundays will be improved from 70 minutes to 65 minutes of frequency all day. We do have a slight frequency reduction on the Route 24 for Sundays only, which will go from every 45 minutes to every 55 minutes all day. The following routing changes will occur. The Route 24 has 3 morning and afternoon trips that make a deviation off of Clever Road and provide service along an area called Pitchfork Lane. We evaluated the ridership in this area, and the ridership is extremely low. And so we have determined to discontinue that deviation and just keep those trips out on the main trunk on Clever Road. The Route 41 will be extended in the downtown area to Penn Station so that it can improve the operator relief opportunities. The Route 54 will be extended to Allegheny Station to help improve operator relief opportunities, and will also provide an additional connection to CCAC Northside. Route 60 has been redesigned. It's nearly the same identical routing, but it has been set up in a manner that's in a loop for a loop variant, and I have a map on the next slide that will go into more detail of that. The Route 67 and the Route P68, there's a slight modification at the Monroeville Mall area. There's a new VA clinic that will be opening up in June, and we will begin service to that location on Monday through Saturday. The facility is not open on Sundays, so Monday through Saturday, the Route 67 and the P68 will provide service to this location. And to go into some further detail on the Route 60 loop format, the route will now start and end this loop at the Olympia Shopping Center towards the southern portion of the route. When it departs the Olympia Shopping Center, it will make a right and head up Walnut to near McKeesport Transportation Center, and then service the north loop there, return to McKeesport Transportation Center, head down south on Walnut, service the southern end of the route, and return back to Olympia Shopping Center. So that's the loop formation that I was referring to. It's essentially the same routing, except that the route will not go into the Olympia Shopping Center on both as it passes both of it. So this will make a better, we will not have folks having to wait at McKeesport Transportation Center on the bus, since the bus will be continuing that loop. And it'll provide a little bit more time for folks to shop at Olympia Shopping Center to catch the bus as that bus lays over there for the Route 60. We do have some trip time adjustments. So the Route 57 and the 69 will have some trips shifted daily for every day of the week. The Route 77 on weekday onlys will have some additional late evening trips added to the schedule. The routes 52L, 53L, and the P76 will have some trips shifted on the weekdays only. The 61D will have some trips shifted on Saturdays. And then on the weekends, the Route 86, 87, and 88 will have some trips shifted in the schedule. And that completes my presentation today, and I'll answer any questions that you may have at this time.
I would, do you have any questions, Ann?
Just a quick question on the 41. So if it's going to the East Busway for layover, when it comes back to go outbound, is it still servicing that same stop on 6th? Or is it just going straight by on Smithfield?
Straight by on Smithfield. It will be exactly what the Route 39 is doing today, because it also goes to Penn Park. So there is a stop that will be discontinued in the downtown area on 6th, since it won't be there. So as it's going up, into downtown, going up to Liberty, going to the busway, it'll come down Smithfield and just proceed straight.
Okay.
Yes.
Other committee members, any questions? Okay, other board members, any questions? Thank you. Philip, question, Sandy. We don't have to, there's no recommendation here. In other words, it's just a presentation, right? We
That's
don't.
my understanding.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we don't have to.
There's no
refer-
action item for this committee on.
Okay, all right. Well, yeah, thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Next on the agenda is overview of access. Before we begin, I wanted to mention the fact that, and I've talked about this ever since I've been on the board, the significance of access in our system. A lot of times when people think of PRT, they think of the buses and the rail. Well, an integral part of our system is access. And I think sometimes access is not given as much credit as they deserve. So Karen, I guess you're up to do a PowerPoint presentation on access. So welcome.
Wow. Excuse me. Good morning, everyone. I'm Karen Hesch. I'm from Access. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about our service. Access actually started in 1979 as an UMTA service and methods demonstration program. And if you even know what UMTA is, you're probably at least as old as I am. This demonstration was a success. It was initially set for 6 months, and here we are 43 years later. So yay. Throughout the time, it's been sponsored by Port Authority, now Pittsburgh Regional Transit, and it is a very unique service model. It is the only completely decentralized brokerage paratransit program in the United States. So it's set up with the broker managing the program and the private sector doing all the operation functions of the transportation itself. So in a way, it was the first perfect public-private partnership. We currently have 5 service providers, 1 nonprofit, 4 for-profit, 2 of them are WBEs, and 4 of them are locally owned. So we only have 1 national company. Coordination is a founding principle of Access. There are 145 different agencies that purchase service through the system, which requires a high level of coordination of the funding behind the scenes. Port Authority is required by law to provide complimentary paratransit service, which it does, but the Access system exceeds all the minimum standards in the ADA. Our on-time performance right now is at about 96.4, and our average cost per trip is about $40. Pre-COVID, it was about 28, which was, I think, probably the lowest cost per trip of any urban transit system, paratransit program. Our $40 trip compares pretty favorably with how other transit systems are recovering cost-wise post-COVID. So this is a chart that illustrates how coordination works in transportation. So the idea is that you get multiple people to purchase their service from the coordinated system, creating economies of scale and making it less expensive for all the sponsors. So this chart shows you who some of the major sponsors are. And what a sponsor decides to purchase service, to a certain extent, they get to frame the rules for their sponsorship. So they decide who's eligible, what kind of trips people can take, if there are any other limitations on their service, whether we collect a full fare or partial fare, what they want their invoicing to look like. And behind the scenes, we do as much as we can to customize that service for the sponsor to encourage them to continue to use the service. Because the more revenue there is from other sources, the less expensive it is for PRT, which makes it possible then for PRT to go beyond the minimums. And here's how the ridership is currently distributed in the system. You'll see that there is no single funder that bears the bulk of the ridership or funding responsibility, which is really important that it's spread out like that. This has shifted post-COVID. Right now, medical assistance transportation is the largest portion of our ridership. That ridership never really decreased very much during COVID, surprisingly. But having that MATP program sponsor all those rides is good for Access because it's a stable, predictable source of ridership. And the medical assistance transportation program pays the fully allocated cost of their rides. So we're getting 100% cost recovery on all of those trips. And you see the variety of other types of ridership we have. This is how it works for the person. When any individual within the Access system is probably eligible for at least 3 and maybe as many as 6 different types of sponsorship of their rides. So we try to make it so that the rider doesn't have to make those decisions. It's transparent to the rider. So all they're doing is calling for a trip, and it's our job to get them what I would call the right ride. And the right ride is the sponsor that meets their needs for that trip. And the decision usually is the one that's the most favorable to the customer, which is almost always the one that's the least expensive for the customer. So we have a person calling in all these different sponsors that they're eligible for a trip. So let's look at the person's experience. This make-believe rider is a 24-year-old woman who lives in Squirrel Hill. She is eligible for the Office of Developmental Programs Home and Community-Based Waiver Program. And that's funding that's designed to maintain people with disabilities in their homes to participate fully in community life. She also has ADA eligibility for paratransit service, but she's conditionally eligible, which means that there are some trips that she's functionally able to take independently on the bus and other trips where she would use Access. This particular person's conditional eligibility reflects the fact that she went through the city school system and they taught her how to successfully ride a single bus route. So she knows how to get from her home to the bus stop in Squirrel Hill to get on that bus and take the bus to work downtown and get home. So her condition of eligibility is that if she's going to work, she has to use transit. But if she's taking any other trip, she's eligible to use Access because she only knows how to use the service for one bus trip. Access is the one of only 2 programs in the United States that actually implements those conditions of eligibility when people call for trips. So we're determining when a person can ride the bus, under what conditions, and then do those conditions exist when the person actually calls for a trip. So let's look at our rider's trip request. We've helped her figure out that her daily trip to work downtown, she's going to take on the bus. So she knows how to walk to Forbes and Murray and get on the 61C and ride downtown and get off on Smithfield Street and walk to work. And we've helped her get a half-fare bus pass to do that. Her waiver program pays for her to participate in Special Olympics. So when she goes bowling once a week, the waiver program pays for that trip. So she's getting that trip free to her, and we're billing the waiver program for the ride. When she wants to go shopping at Walmart, she likes the one in North Versailles. The 61C doesn't go there, and she was never taught to take that trip. So she's ADA eligible to take that trip, and she pays $3.15 for that, and PRT pays the rest of the fare. And when she goes to the doctor at Fall Clinic, that is served by the 61C, but the Medical Assistance Transportation Program allows her to take that trip on Access. And so when she goes to Fall Clinic to the doctor, she's riding Access, she pays no fare, and we're billing the Medical Assistance Transportation Program. I mentioned that PRT has an obligation under the law to provide complimentary paratransit for people and for trips that can't be taken on the fixed route system. There are service standards in the ADA for paratransit, and PRT's Access program exceeds every single one of them. And the 2 areas where that is most important and significant for customers is the availability of service countywide, regardless of whether or not the bus goes there, but countywide, 365 days a year from 6 a.m. till midnight. And there are a number of people in this room that have fought hard over the years to keep that level of service where it is. The other one that's very important to customers is the fare. The ADA would allow PRT to charge twice the non-discounted adult cash fare for a minimum fare for an Access trip, which would be $5.25, right? $5.50, even more. Thank you. You can tell why I'm not the accountant. The minimum fare for Access is $3.15 for an ADA eligible trip. We used to have a fierce advocate who pointed out to me on a regular basis that just because PRT could charge $5.50, it didn't mean that someone with a disability who wasn't employed could afford to pay $11 to go to the grocery store to buy a dozen eggs. So the low fare makes it usable for people, and it means that people don't have to make choices about where they're going based on what they can afford. They make choices based on what they want to do. We're very passionate about making sure that people use the accessible fixed route system, and it's one area where I think PRT has done an exceptional job, particularly over the last 10 years, is making the service more usable for people with disabilities. So we're regularly doing whatever we can to make our 2 systems work together for people. And one of the places that starts is at the Mobility Center in our office. And Darcy Cleaver, almost 10 years ago, got PRT to build the front end of a bus in our office. And it literally is the front end of a bus. So we're using that to help evaluate people's ability to get on and off the bus, turn around in the bus, get into the securement area. But it's also used for practice. The city schools, the intermediate unit, Pittsburgh Vision Service, all bring students to the Mobility Center to practice in an environment that's not stressful. So your first experience isn't with worrying about, are you going to miss your stop and is anybody going to be mean to you? But it's learning how the function of the bus actually works. The other use that we get from it is people with new mobility aids who are anxious about getting around inside the bus. So somebody gets a new scooter and they're not sure if they're going to be able to get on and off. They come to the mobility center and practice in a stress-free environment as many times as they need to until they're comfortable turning around and backing into that securement area. For eligibility, the process starts in our office with this bus, but it continues outdoors in the real environment so that we can see how people handle themselves on the street the way everyone else has to. The other thing we're working hard on to integrate paratransit and fixed route is first and last mile service. So we're using access to substitute for people walking or rolling on one end to get to the bus stop if there's a barrier. And that barrier is almost always pedestrian access issues, lack of sidewalks in poor condition, steep hills. It's Pittsburgh, right? So we pick somebody up, they take a short access trip to link to the bus to take a longer bus ride. If they choose to do that, the access trip is free as an incentive to get them to do it, and it gets them on the bus at half fare. So there's a convenience incentive and there's a financial incentive for people to do this. And we remind riders that this is comparable to what lots of PRT riders do. They go to park and rides, they get dropped off at the bus stop. We're doing the same thing on access. And we've actually provided PRT with mapping of where our feeder spots are so that at some point in the future, any bus rider, or particularly a bus rider with a disability, could figure out how to use access to get to and from a feeder stop that has the amenities that make it a good location to transfer people. Our ridership is slowly recovering. We're at between 71 and 75% of pre-pandemic levels. Our riders tend to be older. They're more reluctant to go out. So that's coming back a little bit more slowly than we'd hoped. But the slowest part of the ridership to bounce back has been in programs that serve people with intellectual disabilities, the day programs. And that's largely because those programs don't have enough staff to open to full capacity. So people that have been going 5 days a week now are only able to go 1 or 2 days a week, and some people still aren't able to go at all. But we're ready when they are. Access is a great big system with thousands and thousands of people, but it's very person-centered. So both for our customers and our sponsors, we're looking for them to tell us not just about the ride, but what are the amenities of the ride that make it work for people and for sponsors. All of our service is door to door with assistance up or down as many as 4 steps, even for people who use manual wheelchairs. And we are the only system in the United States that's still doing that. Drivers provide assistance, which is really important to particularly older people, assistance with packages, right through the lobby of the apartment building to the elevator so that they can shop with ease. For people who can't be left unsupervised, we have a hand-to-hand offering so that they're guaranteed not to be left alone, where they're actually handed off to a family member or a staff person. We collect fares using an electronic purse so the rider doesn't have to handle any fare implements or coins, and it's very easy for us to collect the fare as well. It's a safe and secure personal account that people can manage themselves. We do a lot with incident management because the drivers are sort of the front door to our service. So if drivers see a situation where they believe the person needs assistance, in using funding from the United Way, we developed a program which we call Change of Condition, and it's built into the tablet on board where the driver has his manifest. So he can simply push a button for a category, and then if he wants to, he can make an audio recording of up to 3 minutes to describe to us what he's seeing about the person. We get that immediately, and then we're very closely linked with human service agencies to make that referral and get that person help. What we're seeing a lot more of post-COVID is elder abuse, either in the form of self-neglect or financial abuse. And I'm glad that we're able to be a partner in reporting that and getting solutions for it. And our riders like to have real-time information just like anybody else. So we have automated call-outs 10 minutes before the vehicle is supposed to arrive and vehicle ETAs. The vehicle ETA is available to the rider 30 minutes before the time of arrival, and it tells them the number of stops before theirs and the vehicle number, so they know what to look for. Once they're on board, they can see the estimated time that they're going to arrive at their destination, which is very helpful for people who maybe are taking their first or second trip and are anxious about whether they're going to get there on time or not. And it enhances our existing real-time features in that it allows people to cancel their trips online without having to make a phone call and view all of their scheduled trips online to make sure that they're in there properly. It's available by computer or smartphone. Privacy is protected because it requires a login. People can see the map and where the vehicle is, and it's updated every 60 seconds. For people who would prefer a text, and this is actually becoming more popular than the map itself, there's a text messaging option. They can send a text or make a phone call to get a text. And we were extremely diligent in making sure that the text messaging meets all the accessibility requirements so that it's usable for people with vision disabilities. A lot of the money for access to support fares comes from PennDOT, and PennDOT's programs historically required that trips be reserved a day in advance. PennDOT allowed us to enter a pilot program last year where we're permitted now to provide same-day service for any of the programs that PennDOT sponsors. We are very encouraged by the results of that pilot. We're able to provide close to 50% of the requests, not quite, but almost. We do a 100% customer satisfaction survey after all the same-day trips, so we're calling people to see what their experience is. And mostly they're telling us that they appreciate that there's no trip purpose restrictions. So if they get a call in the morning and a friend had an extra ticket for Heinz Hall, or it's a nice day and they haven't been out in a couple months and they feel good and they decide they want to go shopping, they can call, and if we have an empty seat available for them, they get that seat on the same day. Our pilot is scheduled to go through the end of December of this year, and we have every hope that PennDOT will continue it beyond that. And here's where we are post-COVID looking forward. Just like PRT and frankly everybody else in the world, our providers are still struggling with driver recruitment and retention. Our system is short still about 60 drivers. There are about 280 drivers in the system, so we need about 60 more to be fully staffed. Just like everybody else, access riders' travel patterns and habits and trip mix changed post-COVID. We have more medical trips, which means the trip length is longer and the trips are not as dense as they used to be. So everybody isn't going to locations in groups. They're going all over the place. So that's a more difficult and more expensive kind of trip to provide. The ridership is returning slowly, but we're working hard on making sure that we get the message out there that we're here to serve people. The federal funding that we enjoyed through COVID is slowly coming to an end. So we expect that there will be some implications for access and more pressure and cost effectiveness and fare recovery. A lot of things got more expensive post-COVID, but one I would like to point out is the availability of vehicles and the price. Our providers use primarily Ford trucks. So Ford E350 or E450 trucks with a body built on them that makes them accessible. Ford stopped making trucks during the pandemic because there wasn't any market for them. So as they retool to make trucks, it takes a long time to get a Ford truck now. And the conversion van that used to cost about $61,000 pre-COVID is coming in now between $125,000 and $130,000 for one vehicle, and the wait is 6 to 10 months. So that's created quite a challenge for our system. We are working on improving productivity and reducing the cost per trip because we know if the sponsors can't afford the service, it won't be there anymore. So that's a very high priority. We're trying to make sure that we take opportunities to continue our good partnership in the community. I think our system did an outstanding job with that during COVID, and we created some new really strong partnerships that we want to continue. So we want to be alert to what they're looking for. And access to healthy food as part of the social determinants of health is a high priority now. So we're working hard on that in cooperation with the Area Agency on Aging, the Food Bank, and Age Friendly Greater Pittsburgh to make sure that older adults have low fares and good opportunity to go shopping. I mentioned the work that we're doing with at-risk seniors, cooperating with the Area Agency on Aging, and we're working with the County Department of Human Services to see how we can help improve transportation for people with either chronic or immediate behavioral health issues. I mentioned our same-day pilot project. I think our Committee for Accessible Transportation is going to work hard to make sure PennDOT lets us keep that. John? And on behalf of our system and our riders, I'd like to formally thank PRT and its board for the incredible support that you've given our program over the years. Access works because we work together to serve the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Are there any questions of committee members of Karen?
I have a quick question. How do they schedule their trips? Do they have to call, and who do they call?
They do have to call, and they call the provider. So
Oh,
they're assigned a provider based on where they live.
Gotcha. And I assume many of these people can establish like standing trips, right?
Correct.
They're going the same place every day.
Yeah, and about 40% of our service is standing orders, and that's good for us. That's kind of the skeleton of how the schedules are built.
Any questions of other committee members or board members?
No questions, but I'd like to make a comment. Very impressive presentation and phenomenal program.
Thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge over a long period of time, Karen Hess's leadership, because a lot of this was made possible with her, especially working with Darcy Cleaver on this system. And Sandy had asked me a question, am I going to learn anything? Well, of course, because I've used the system for years, but every time Karen makes a presentation, I learn something new. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Karen.
JT, it's Michelle. Thank you, Karen. That was a terrific report and a great refresher for us and good information about the post-COVID challenges. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. That concludes the committee. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, the meeting stands in adjournment. So thank you, and I guess you're up
Yep.
next, Dan.
Give everybody a second to find their papers for my meeting. Okay, we'll call to order the Finance Committee meeting for May 18th. First item of business is a roll call of our committee members. Board Member Liptak, are you present? Here. Board Member DeLon? Representative Piscatano? Okay, any other board members present? Can you please identify yourselves?
Jeff Letwin,
John
Deputy.
Tagg.
Michelle Smianik.
Allie Doyle.
Thank you. All right. First up is approval of minutes of the April 20th, 2023 Finance Committee meeting. Any questions or revisions for the minutes? All right, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
I'll second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, minutes are approved. Next up is preliminary fiscal year 2024 operating and capital budgets presentation. Pete.
Good morning, Madam Chair and board members. My name is Peter Shank. I'm the controller at PRT, and we're going to go over the preliminary operating and capital budgets for fiscal 2024. Before I get into the nuts and bolts, I do want to publicly acknowledge the efforts of the finance staff, particularly Tia Gunn, Sean Tregesser, Dave McCarthy, Rebecca Kuzer, and Ed Typansky. It's really a 6-month process involving numerous meetings with all of the departments and division directors and getting their requests for resources for both capital and operating for the upcoming fiscal year. So for the operating budget, we currently stand at about $534.2 million, which is a 1.6% increase over the revised operating budget that was just approved a few months ago. Our capital budget currently sits at $195.1 million, which is a 31% decrease from the fiscal 23 capital budget. And that's that decrease is directly the result of the PRT project is now fully funded, and that was included in the 23 capital budget. And so the capital budget's going down because those dollars and that project is not included in 2024. So looking at the operating budget in terms of the passenger revenues and riderships, we're currently projecting about a 10% increase in revenue for fiscal 24. We're about 16% up year over year for this current fiscal year for passenger revenue. And we might adjust that between now and the final presentation to the board, depending on when I get into the April statements. We actually had a very good results for the month of April in passenger revenue, so we'll adjust that accordingly in the fiscal 24 operating budget. And as you can see, we're trending positively since 2021, in the heart of the pandemic, from both the ridership and a passenger revenue perspective. More specifically, you can see that since January, we're likewise trending well in the area of passenger revenue. So we hope that continues into next fiscal year and anticipate that it will. Where are we on the federal stimulus? Now, this is since the inception of the federal stimulus dollars were made available to PRT. And so in the heart of the pandemic, Allegheny County provided about $22.1 million of their CARES funding to offset some reductions in the drink tax during that time period. We've used about $136.3 million of the ARPA financing and about $105.4 million of the CARES financing. So currently we stand at about $210 million remaining of dollars to invoice. It's our anticipation and hope, since we've kind of pivoted our strategy on federal stimulus dollar invoicing, that we will have invoiced all of the remaining CARES funding and also the remaining ARPA funding by the end of this fiscal year. So that would just leave about $143 million of the CARISA financing or funding that we would invoice in fiscal 2024. What is that? What have those federal stimulus dollars been used on? It has helped to supplement the lost revenues. Back in the heart of the pandemic, we used it on personal protective equipment. We used it to offset increased staffing and overtime related to sanitizing both vehicles and facilities. Those dollars have also been used for paid time off for employees that had contracted COVID and had any type of reaction to the vaccine. Currently, we're using it to offset expenses for operator staffing, diesel fuel costs. We've also expanded it slightly and are now including utility costs and also some maintenance expense on some recent invoices. In terms of our funding stakeholders for fiscal 24, the Commonwealth continues to be the largest benefactor at about $280.3 million. Due to the federal stimulus dollars, the federal dollars total about $71.6 million, Allegheny County $39 million, and the Regional Asset District at $3 million. We have incurred a upward trajectory on the state operating assistance. We're been officially notified of a 3.8% increase over the fiscal 23 dollars, and fiscal 23 dollars had actually increased about 7.8%. So we're seeing healthy increases from PennDOT in terms of the operating assistance. We are required by law to have structurally balanced operating budget. So the fiscal 23 revised budget was $525.9 million. And this preliminary is currently set at $534.2 million. Some of the assumptions that have been used to put together this budget, we have the ATU increase, contractual increase, which would occur in January of 2024. We have a contractual increase for the police officers and detectives. And we also have an anticipated wage increase for the Internal Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, which is a resolution that Mike Setterl will be presenting to you, I believe, right after my presentation here. From a non-union wage perspective, we have a 3% merit pool, and something that we started last year, we have a 1% performance pool included in addition to the 3% merit pool. We are doing phase 2 of a market study that Inez Colon and her group is doing in human resources to look at non-union salaries and make sure they're competitive with the marketplace. On the employee benefits standpoint, we're assuming we have contracted caps with both UPMC and Highmark, so we're assuming that the increase would be at those cap levels. We do have negotiations that usually occur with both those parties, and the hope would be that through those negotiations we could get those increases less than the caps if possible. As we've been saying that we have a high number of vacant positions, so we are currently assuming that we would fill about 125 of those vacant and new jobs next year. So we're not assuming full manpower for 24 from a healthcare perspective, but it still would be a sizable increase from where we're currently situated. Our healthcare contracts are locked in through December of 2024, at which point we would have to have further negotiations. This budget also assumes there's a phase-in period that was contractually agreed to with the Amalgamated Transit Union. where it would take the assumed rate of return from 7.75% down to 7.5% over the life of the contract. So that reduction in the assumed rate of return is reflected in our pension expense. And the pension expense in particular is budgeted to increase for fiscal 24. I have a separate slide on that where you'll see that it's, well, in fact, here it is. So we have a slight uptick in fiscal 2024, and that's due to the lower market stock market returns in 2022. In 2025, it's just a temporary reduction, and that's because both returns and losses are smoothed over a 15-year period. And for those that remember back 2008, there was extreme market volatility, also known as a market crash. And so those losses are basically being will fall off the 15-year period, and so that is why we have that slight downturn in 2025, and then we're back to basically historical levels for 26 through 28. From the healthcare perspective, it is an upward trajectory, but I will say that the good news is that the retiree healthcare, which has always been an issue in terms of a legacy cost perspective, and through negotiations with ATU, that we've gone from a situation back in 2016 and 17, where it could have been in the $30 and $40 million just for retiree healthcare, down to I think it's in the $15 or $16 million range for this 2024 time horizon. So that is a good indication that we are controlling the legacy costs. In terms of a head count, as we've mentioned at previous meetings, we do have issues with vacant positions. We're just so we would have we're budgeting those vacant positions. In addition, we will be budgeting these 23 new jobs, and 9 of those 23 are related to an expansion of the hours of the customer service function for fiscal 24. Diesel fuel, which is always a big expense for the authority, that in conjunction with Tony Trona and Anna Marie McKibben and his fine group in the procurement department, over the past 3 or 4 months, we've been able to lock in about 80% of the anticipated diesel that we will need next year. We're anticipating about a 5% increase in the number of gallons, assuming that service levels go up slightly. So through the use of buying futures contracts, this maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, we were able to lock in a sizable number of gallons at about $2.60, which is quite below the float rate. Gross expenses of $534.2 million, and this is a people business, so almost 72% of that goes towards wages and salaries and employee benefits, which would include healthcare and pension. You have the materials and supplies, which would include the diesel fuel, is at 10% of the budget. The access program that Karen just alluded to and did a great presentation on is 6%. Provisions for injuries and damages, which are things like our claims experience, is 2%. Purchase services, which are things like work done by outside contractors, is at 5%. Utilities at 2%, and other expenses, which includes things like software licensing and that sort of thing, is at 3% of the budget. Revenues and subsidies. Now this includes more than just the state operating assistance. We have the passenger revenue set at 8%. The CARISA and federal funding would make up about 14% of next year's budget. Capitalizations, which includes some other federal, state, and local dollars that offset the operating budget, would be at 12%. The access program services, which are the shared ride revenues that they receive through, well, we receive, but through the PennDOT, is at 2%. County drink tax is at 7%. And the RAD funding would make up about 1% of that preliminary budget. So some of the items that uncertainty over the next 5 years, obviously the federal stimulus depletion would be probably at the top of the list. And we do have a couple of slides that get into the nuts and bolts of that. We have a number of utility contracts, both electric and natural gas related, that are going to expire in the next 12 to 18 months. And Tony and his crew will, well, not Tony, but let's just say his crew will be responsible for we'll email you the results, Tony. Will be responsible for renegotiating those and locking in rates for the future. We still do have some supply chain challenges that we're in terms of bus and rail parts. The pension and stock market performance, as I mentioned, the 2022 stock market results were not good, but we have had, a slight uptick since 2022. But that's always the volatility in that is always a wild card. I've mentioned the healthcare and future negotiations on that. The ridership and passenger revenue, as with all our other operating groups in the country, are experiencing issues with ridership and return to work issues. Labor contracts, although we've just completed all of those in the past 12 to 18 months, over the next 5 years, those would all due to expire once again. And the diesel fuel uncertainty will also factor into the 5-year projections. So where does it look when you take into the federal stimulus and where we're projecting expenses to go over through 2028? We're anticipating that we would be in fine position through 2027. And then in 2028, assuming that our expense levels would be at budget, which thankfully we've been able to remain below budget here now the past 3 or 4 years. But assuming we did expend at those budget levels, we would run into some issues in 2028 potentially. And this assumes, I should also mention that this does assume static levels of state operating assistance. And as I've mentioned on an earlier slide, we have seen some increases in state operating assistance, particularly over the past 2 years. So if that continues, that certainly would aid the outlook for 2028. In terms of the federal stimulus usage, so what we will do is, like I mentioned, we will anticipate fully invoicing CARES and ARPA this year. And then we would use CARISA invoicing to help subsidize the 2024 proposed budget. There's about $143 million left of the Carissa. We have not invoiced any of that. Now moving on to the capital budget. We've also, now the capital budget in totality, as I mentioned, is due to go down 31%, but that's due to the BRT financing. Net expenses at $195.1 million. 32% of that would go towards facilities, 35% towards the fixed guideway programs, 11% to revenue vehicle bus purchases. The debt service, which is currently at a little over $18 million and it's static through 2029, makes up 10% of that. And then support programs, which are some IT related and some other non-revenue vehicle makes up to 12%. Much like the operating budget, the state is the largest supporter of the capital budget. It's at 71% for the capital budget, federal government at 27%, and local is at 2%. Debt service, as I mentioned, $18.6 million. And we were able to refinance that a few years ago. So, we're able to get about a $3 million a year savings because of that refinancing, and that is set through 2029, which is, it will be fully paid off in 2029. Revenue vehicles, we have 30 40-foot clean diesel buses anticipated for purchase in the 2024 budget. We also have a program of bus seat replacement at $1.5 million, moving from the cloth to the plastic, and then we also have $1 million for preliminary design for light rail vehicle replacement. Bridge improvements. Catherine's ecstatic about this. We have the Panhandle Bridge. This isn't for fully funding, but it's definitely making a down payment on that project, which Mr. O'Hare can get into the specifics, but we definitely have a lot of we're making great strides in getting that project fully funded, so that when we're ready to actually do construction, that the dollars will be there. Some other bridges: Center Avenue, Kelly Avenue, Penn Avenue bridges are included in the bridge improvement program. Tunnels at $16.7 million. That would be the CBD tunnel, tunnel concrete replacement, Mount Washington and Mount Lebanon tunnel rail replacement, and Wabash Berry electrical improvements. Under the bus and fixed guideway improvements at $15.9 million, we have the East Busway repaving project, the Route 88 grade crossing improvements, Red Line and Panhandle Bridge design, and then also dollars dedicated to the rail grinding program. Under the facilities and stations improvements at $23.2 million, we have the BRT charging stations, underground storage tanks, facilities, floors, rehabs, and HVAC improvements. Under rail facility improvements at $36.1 million, we have principally the track equipment building at Penn Park makes up a large majority of that. Also a smaller amount, obviously, but the Belasco station is included in that. And then, as I mentioned, the other support programs, a large majority of that is information technology related at $20.3 million, and then a small sliver for non-revenue vehicles, and then like forklifts and things like that in the shop. So what are the next steps after this meeting today? We would present this presentation to the ACTC committee next week. We will make a few minor adjustments, as I mentioned, like probably in the passenger revenue area. And then if there's any additional adjustments in the state and capital dollars, but I don't anticipate anything. And then in June, we would propose to the board the final operating and capital budgets for fiscal 2024. And assuming that was approved, we would load that information into our PeopleSoft ERP system, and away we go for fiscal 2024. Can I answer any questions? Of the group?
Any questions from committee members? Any questions from other board members?
So it's clear, we will spend all of what I refer to as the COVID funding money. That will all be spent. Nothing gets sent back.
Yes, Catherine has been in consultation with FTA, our region, and they assure us that the operating money is considered obligated and not part of the negotiations with the increasing the debt ceiling. So, I mean, that's the information we've been given from FTA. So now let me clarify. We won't necessarily be spending all this money, but we'll be invoicing it so that it's in our coffers and we can get interest on it versus sitting at the federal level. So,
But no money goes back. That's
what we're told. That's the information we're given. So,
all right, thank you, Peter.
Yeah.
Any other questions from other board members? As usual, we feel very well prepared. Thank you for all the great information.
you're welcome. So now,
Oh, go ahead. Yes,
Okay.
financial statements.
yeah, so
for April
we'll
2023.
move on and I'll try to make this brief. So the April financial statement review. Total operating income was over budget for the month by 307,000. As I mentioned, passenger revenue was pretty much on budget for the month, only $8,940 below budget. For the fiscal year, total operating income is about $1.9 million below budget due to lower passenger revenues, but that's partially offset by healthy returns in interest income. Our total expenses for the month of April continue the trend of being under budget, and that's due to lower materials and supplies expense. Continuing on with the April financial results, the lower expense levels in materials and diesel fuel contributed to that very positive variance in materials and supplies. Our total expenses for the fiscal year continue to trend well below budget by $40.5 million, with about $20.5 million of that due to lower wages, salaries, and employee benefits related to the vacant positions. Our subsidies for the month were just slightly below budget by about $340,000 due to lower state operating assistance related to the access match. Our subsidies for the year are about $5 million below budget due to lower ARPA invoicing and state operating assistance, but those should normalize by the year end. In terms of a year-over-year perspective, total operating income over last fiscal year, about 18.9% higher. As I mentioned, our passenger revenue is about 16.3% higher, or $6 million. And that's with, in addition, interest income is another $2.23 million higher than last fiscal year. Total expenses are higher by about $22.5 million or 6.2%. In addition to the higher wages for higher wages and salaries and benefits, our materials and supplies are 9.5 million higher than last fiscal year. And the majority of that is due to higher diesel fuel in fiscal 23 versus fiscal 22. Our access expenses likewise are $2.3 million higher than last fiscal year. And access expense would have been, at a low water marks for fiscal 21 and 22, as their ridership was down and they were transporting fewer people. But now they've, as Karen alluded to, have rebounded. Our subsidy versus last fiscal year is higher due to that 7.8% increase in state operating assistance that we're receiving year over year. And also the additional ARPA funding that we're invoicing versus last fiscal year. So moving on to the operating reserves, we began the month with $168.8 million in operating reserves. We had $56.3 million in operating receipts. We received $7 million from Allegheny County, $18 million from the Commonwealth, and $11.5 million from the federal government in ARPA funding. We had cash outflows of $41.6 million for salary, wages, benefits, services, materials and supplies, and access expense. And finally, we ended the month with $183.5 million in operating reserves.
Any questions from committee members? Any questions from board members? I think we're good. Thank you.
All right, the last time I get to hand it over to Mr. Tony Trona.
Oh, I have to have a motion to adjourn.
Oh, sorry.
Do I have a motion to adjourn? So moved. We'll stand adjourned until, thank you, Jen, until June. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I think the meeting has adjourned. We need to change the slides. Here we go. Welcome to the Performance Oversight Committee meeting. My name is Michelle Smianek. We're going to do a roll call here very quickly. So for board member Ms. Gorski, are you with us this morning? Board member Representative Piscatano, are you here with us this morning? Okay. Would other board members please state their names for the record?
Jeff Letwin.
Anna Warwick.
Allie Doyle.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mr. Trone, I'm going to have you hold on one more minute here. Our next item of business would be approval of minutes for the April 20th. Do I have any corrections or additions to our April 20th board meeting or committee meeting minutes? If not, could I have a motion to approve these meeting minutes, please?
So moved.
And I'll second that. Please everyone say aye if you approve. Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Great. All right. We are done with that. We're moving on to item 3, which is very important. Mr. Tony Trona, thank you so much. I hear that you are moving on to other adventures, which is very exciting. And I want to thank you for your expertise, your professionalism, your friendship. And I also want to add into the record how swift and expertly you moved us through COVID to Zoom meetings. I remember that very first meeting that we had with the staff and talked about how we were going to deal with procurement, RFPs, and all of those other issues. You are a star, and I am grateful for you, my friend. So,
well,
now,
I was actually going to save this for the end of my report, but since you mentioned it, Madam Chair, yes, this will be my last meeting, and I will retire as of June 1st to take on different challenges. I would like to take this opportunity to thank this committee and the board for their guidance and leadership over the years. I have considered it an honor and privilege to represent PRT as the Director of Procurement. Through the years, I've done my due diligence to bring the best procurement opportunities to this board while maintaining the integrity of our procurement process and within the guidelines of FTA and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So I want to truly thank the board for this opportunity.
Thank you, Tony. I appreciate that. So I guess we're moving on to the final awarding of bids. Take it away.
So, well, yeah, let's get down to business, huh? I do have 5 items for your review and presentation to the full board. And all of our bids were publicly advertised and our e-business documents were distributed. The first is office supplies. And we're going to utilize the state schedule through the Department of General Services. They awarded a contract to WB Mason, and the current contract is effective April 14th, 2023, which permits 2 one-year contract extensions. So it's our recommendation that the contract be awarded under the same terms and conditions as Pennsylvania Department of General Services with WB Mason Company for the purchase of office supplies, and the estimated amount of $278,000. The pricing represents a 29% increase through the previous contract 1 year ago. The second is coach replacement parts for air conditioning. One firm accepted our invitation. 1 bid was received for the purchase of these air conditioning parts to maintain our fleet over a 2-year period. So our recommendation that the award go to Thermo King of Pittsburgh, estimated amount of $903,325. Now, there's been no previous contract for these parts because this is a new generation of parts that had a complete material change, part change. So it was very difficult to do a comparison, apples to apples. But I wanted to give you an idea of where we're looking at. These new parts with the significant change, we've seen a price range from 12 to 33% across the board on these particular parts. And of course, we had 1 bid, so we did our single bid survey and found that the companies could not reliably supply this new generation of parts through the duration of the contract and could not competitively compete with the OEM, which is Thermo King. Number 3, wheel flange lubricator sticks. 4 firms accepted our invitation. 4 bids were received for these parts to maintain our light rail vehicle fleet over a 2-year period. The low bidder, Wesley, did not meet our specification and therefore was ineligible for award. Our recommendation that we award to Shunk Carbon Technology, an estimated amount of $174,800. This price represents less than a 1% decrease. The difference between the low bidder that we had to throw off and the award was $15,000. To give you an idea where the other bids were, the second bidder came in at $175, and the last bidder came up at $198. Number 4, coach radiator assemblies. 1 firm accepted our invitation. 1 bid was received for the maintenance of our PRT's articulated buses. This document says the electric. I will have that changed on our final draft. The contract be awarded to aftermarket parts, an estimated amount of $209,881.25. There's been no previous contract for this particular radiator because it is for one of our new articulated bus. The single bid survey was conducted and found that the part is manufactured by Modine and they will not bid directly. They go through their representatives, which was aftermarket parts. Number 5, air, oil, coolant, and transmission and fuel filters. 10 firms accepted our invitation. 8 bids were received for these parts for our bus fleet over a 2-year period. This is a line item solicitation. 2 of the low bidders did not meet our technical requirements and therefore deemed non-eligible for award. So our recommendation that we award the vehicle maintenance program, 3 items for $199,877. Cummings, 13 items, estimated amount $920,738.90. DW Diesel, 1 item for $35,838. Gillig, 1 item, estimated amount of $15,215.20. Keystone Automotive Operations, 2 items, estimated amount of $70,600. The 2 items that we had to go to the next bidder on the first item was item number 3, and the difference in price was $152. The other one was line item 21. The difference in price was $9,300. This price represents a 26% increase over the previous contracted price. 26% increase, but we still had very good bid participation. So I'm very comfortable that this is the market price for these items. Madam Chair, and that concludes my report. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Trona. Any of our committee members have questions, or board members for Mr. Trona about these issues or comments on anything? Okay, hearing none. Could I have a motion to move this forward to the full board next week?
So moved.
Second, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Trona, I thank you so much. You have my gratefulness and deep respect for your work and everything that you've done. So I thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, we're moving along to item B, with its authorization to adopt collective bargaining agreement with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, local number 29. Mr. Mike Sutter, good morning.
Good morning, Madam Committee Chairwoman and committee members. This resolution that I have for the committee's consideration this morning would authorize PRT to ratify the terms and conditions of a new collective bargaining agreement with IBEW Local 29. IBEW Local 29 represents 60 PRT employees that work on our customer service, benefits, finance, and police departments, and then some other administrative capacities. PRT's most recent collective bargaining agreement with IBEW expired on April 30th, 2023. Prior to its expiration, representatives of both PRT and IBEW began engaging in good faith negotiations for the proposed terms of a new collective bargaining agreement. In early May, the parties signed a tentative agreement, which is included as Exhibit A to the resolution and members' committee packets this morning, that IBEW membership recently approved and ratified on behalf of IBEW. While more fully detailed in the Exhibit A summary tentative agreement, I would highlight that the proposed new agreement would include a 3-year term retroactive to May 1st, 2023, and then run through April 30th of 2026. Wage increases of 4% in year 1, 3% in year 2, and 3% in year 3, adding Juneteenth as a holiday, which would, if this agreement is approved by the board, that would then cover all of our bargaining units, and we will be able to make Juneteenth an agency-wide holiday as of June 19th, 2023. A COVID-19 attendance bonus that's modeled after the COVID-19 attendance bonus provided to Local 85 and rank and file police officers in their most recent collective bargaining agreements. Opportunity for IBEW represented employees to participate in certain benefit programs currently available to non-represented personnel, such as our paid parental leave policy and our student loan repayment program. And then there's some other miscellaneous provisions relating to work rules for uniform versus non-uniformed employee designations, call-off policy in the customer service department, and qualification periods for positions that may be eligible for hybrid work schedules. Subject to any member questions, I respectfully request that the Performance Oversight Committee recommend this resolution to the full board for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Sutter. Do we have any questions for Mr. Sutter at this point from any members?
So,
Hearing none.
Michelle.
Yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just a comment. I reading the contract, I think it was an excellent contract. I think both IBEW and the Port Authority are winners on this contract, to be honest with you. So a great contract.
Thank you, Mr. King.
Any other members? Hearing no further questions, could I have a motion to move this forward to the full board for next week, please?
So moved.
Second, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Cetra.
Thank you.
Moving along to item C, authorization to enter into agreement to provide executive search, outplacement, and coaching services with Ms. Inez Colon. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Madam Chair, board members, and attendees. The resolution before you is seeking authorization to enter into an agreement to provide executive search, outplacement, and coaching services. These services include, but are not limited to, providing executive search services for identifying and recruiting key members for PRT, outplacement services for executives and professional and/or middle management in the event there's a staff reduction, and coaching services for the same group. Request for proposal number 2209 was publicly advertised, and an informational meeting was held on February 2nd, 2023. 3 proposals were received for executive search services, 1 proposal received for outplacement services, and 2 proposals were received for coaching services. The following proposals have been determined to be the highest rated proposals for the performance of said service: Croft, Hammer, and Associates for Executive Search Services, DBE Gomez Partners Incorporated for Executive Search Services, and DBE CAF and Associates LLC for Outplacement Services, as well as coaching services. We have a total not to exceed amount of $430,000, which will be allocated on an as-needed basis for using work orders. And we're seeking approval for that. In addition, we're recommending a 3-year period with the option to extend the terms of the agreement up to 2 additional years at the sole discretion of PRT. Madam Chair, I respectfully request your approval of this resolution. Are there any questions? Thank you.
You're on mute, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Colon. Hearing no questions, I would like a motion, if I could, to move this forward to the full board next week.
So moved.
Second that, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Ms. Colon.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Moving along to item D on our agenda, authorization to award construction contract for the East Busway Pavement Restoration Project. Mr. Greg O'Hare.
Morning.
Good morning.
This resolution seeks authorization to award construction contract EB 2304 for the East Busway Pavement Restoration. This project is intended to maintain the busway in a state of good repair. The scope of work generally consists of asphalt surface removal and paving approximately 7 miles worth, concrete paving, concrete repairs, drainage repairs, excavation, guide rail replacement, and new pavement markings. The picture on the right is a picture of the East Busway adjacent to Penn Station. The project duration is 380 calendar days from notice to proceed, so approximately 12.5 months. The low responsive bidder is Lindy Paving Incorporated with a bid of $7,668,130. On the left-hand side is an overhead map of the alignment of the East Busway, just for illustration purposes. The asphalt paving will be from Penn Station to around Wilkinsburg, so that's roughly 7 miles worth. And then from Wilkinsburg to the end of the busway, in the Swissville area, we'll see a significant amount of concrete repairs. The picture in the upper right-hand side is a picture of the busway, just to illustrate the condition of portions of the busway. You can see a lot of the potholes and whatnot there that need repaired. And in the bottom right-hand corner is a picture of the concrete barrier along the busway. As you can see, the barrier needs a significant amount of concrete repairs there as well, too. Pending any questions, I respectfully request the committee move the resolution to the full board for consideration.
Thank you, Mr. O'Hare. Any questions from any of our members? Mr. Tague, no questions?
No,
Okay,
just
here-
complaints, just complaints.
Well, you know, we're repairing it, John, so this is good. All right, so could I have a motion to move this forward to the whole board next week, please?
So moved.
Second, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. O'Hara.
Thank you.
Thank you. This brings us to the end of our agenda. And so our meeting is adjourned and we are moving forward to technology. There we go with Jen. Jen, can you hear me? Are you ready?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. I'll give everyone a second to get the materials ready. And I believe, Stan, correct me if I'm wrong, that I am the final meeting of the day. Is that correct? I'm on.
That's correct.
Thank you very much. All right. I'd like to call the meeting of Technology Committee to order. First, I'm going to start with a roll call. Ms. Gorski, are you present? No, I'm here. Any other members present that would like to identify themselves, please?
Allie Doyle.
Anna Gorick.
Jeff
John
Whitman.
Tag.
Michelle Spianic.
Okay, thank you. I will need one of you, I believe per permissible under our rules, to assist me with the motioning and seconding today, since Ms. Muskorski is unavailable, okay? So the first order of business is the approval of the minutes from the April 20th, 2023 committee meeting. If there's no corrections or comments, I'd ask for a motion to approve.
So
So
moved.
moved.
So moved. Oh,
And I second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Now we're going to go over to the awarding of the bids with Tony. I don't recall us saying it was okay for Tony to retire, but if he has to, I guess we'll have to live with that. But Tony, the floor is yours. Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have one item for your review and presentation to the full board. Fixed software expansion. This bid was publicly advertised and our e-business documents were distributed. 3 firms accepted the invitation. 3 bids were received for the purchase of this software license over a 3-year period. It's our recommendation that the award be given to Rockwell Automation, Inc. in the estimated amount of $405,727.40. There's been no previous contract for these items. However, the staff has determined that the prices were fair and reasonable. Just to give you an idea, the second bidder came in at $585,000 and the third bidder came in at $595,000. So we're pretty comfortable with the pricing point on this particular procurement. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Tony. I'll ask if any board members have any questions at this time. Hearing none, I will ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
So moved.
And I will second. All those in favor say aye.
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 And opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And I believe the next item we have Mr. Devlin.
Good morning. I'd also like to thank Tony for all the work supporting the technology procurements over these past years, and Hannah and Jermaine and Kate, et cetera. It's been fabulous working with you folks. The fixed software especially was one that we were very antsy to get through the process, and we're very excited to get it moving. So to move forward with our resolution of the day, as we discussed last month, we have a contract with Scheid & Bachman to do maintenance on our fare boxes, which are now approaching their 10-year lifespan on our buses. We are currently in year 4 of the current contract, and we're requesting our final extension year, which would be year 5 on this particular contract. This amendment would increase the contract by $998,100 for this year, for a total not to exceed of the contract over the 5-year period of $5,480,600. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take those. Otherwise, I'd respectfully request that this resolution be taken to the full board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Devlin. It's very straightforward, and I appreciate your presentation. Are there any questions from board members? Hearing none, I will request or ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
And I will second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. I believe we have no other items today and no presentations. Is that correct, Mr. Devlin?
That is correct. Have a great day.
Okay, thank you. And on behalf of the Allegheny County, or excuse me, how I say Allegheny County, I forget, Pittsburgh Regional Transit Board and the staff, I'd like to thank everyone for their participation today. And Technology Committee stands adjourned and committee meetings for today stand adjourned. So thank you, everyone, and have a very good day.